Mr. Persnickety by Roger Hargreaves. Mr. Persnickety was persnickety about everything. Everything had to be neat and tidy in its proper place. Mr. Persnickety spent all day and every day rearranging his furniture and making sure the flowers grew in a straight line in his garden, and tried to find specks of dust where it couldn't possibly be specks of dust, because he spent all this time making sure there weren't any specks of dust. One fine morning, Mr. Persnickety was having breakfast. He was very persnickety about what he ate. He opened the marmalade pot. "Sweet Henrietta!" he exclaimed. "It's got bits in it!" And as he spent the rest of his morning separating the bits of marmalade, or if you prefer, the marmalade from the bits. Persnickety old persnick pot. People used to call. Right, look. Then Mr. Persnickety went out to his garden and spent the rest of the day straightening out all the blades of grass in his lawn. Persnickety old persnick pot. That evening, Mr. Persnickety was in his kitchen, ironing his shoelaces, when he heard a crash outside. "What's to do?" he murmured to himself, and hurried himself to investigate. There, with a broken garden gate in one hand, and a suitcase in there, and a sheepish grin as he stood, a tiny person. "Mr. Clumsy." "Whoops," he said, holding the gate. "It came off in my hand." "Who?" spluttered Mr. Persnickety, looking at horror his garden gate. "Are you?" "I'm Mr. Clumsy," replied the untidy person, grinning. And he stepped forward to shake Mr. Persnickety's hand, but tripped over and fell on the lawn. "My grass!" cried Mr. Persnickety. "My straight grass, you bent it!" And he got down his hands and knees and started straightening the grass. "But who are you?" he asked his daughter, "and why are you here?" "I'm your cousin," replied Mr. Clumsy. "Your long-lost cousin from Australia, and I've come to visit." Perfect. What is next? "Aren't you pleased to meet me?" continued Mr. Clumsy cheerfully, or knocking over a fly as he got up and picking a suitcase back over the tower, or two or three. Mr. Persnickety, quite obviously, wasn't pleased to see him. "You'd better come in," he muttered. "Folks, I say," remarked Mr. Clumsy, looking through the front door of Mr. Persnickety's house. "I say, what a pretty little place you've got there." And he stepped inside and tripped over his shoelaces. He often does, and knocked over a chair and dropped his suitcase and fell in an untidy heap on the floor. "Whoops," he said. Mr. Persnickety shut his eyes and heaved a sigh and groaned silently to himself. Later that evening, after Mr. Persnickety had cooked them a meal, and after Mr. Clumsy had helped with the washing of the two broken plates, they sat down to talk. Mr. Persnickety sat, as he always did, in a neat and tidy fashion. Mr. Clumsy sat, as he always did, in not so neat and tidy fashion. "How long are you staying?" asked Mr. Persnickety. "Oh, I don't know," grinned Mr. Clumsy. "A few days, a week, a year, I haven't decided." When he awoke at the wedding, Mr. Persnickety jumped out of bed and went to his bathroom. "Oh no," he gasped. "Oh no!" Oh yes, Mr. Clumsy had been there before him. The towels lay in a heap on the floor. The bath was full of water. There were pools of water, and over the bathroom had half of a tube of toothpaste. What a mess. Mr. Persnickety made it all neat and tidy as quickly as he could. There, Mr. Persnickety hurried downstairs. "Morning," said his cousin cheerfully. "I've cooked you breakfast. Sit down. There was an awful mess everywhere." "There we are," said Mr. Clumsy, carrying a plate of bread eggs, broken bread eggs toward the table. Breakfast. They tripped over those shoelaces of his, and the eggs flew through the air, and then they landed all over Mr. Persnickety. Sticky, greasy, yellow fried eggs. Whoops, said Mr. Clumsy. Mr. Persnickety has eggs all over himself. After a week, Mr. Persnickety's house didn't look like Mr. Persnickety's house anymore at all. But after 2 weeks, Mr. Clumsy decided to move on. Thank you for having me, he said to Mr. Persnickety. It was very nice to see you, replied Mr. Persnickety politely. But what he thinking was, it was very nice to see you going. Cheerio, said Mr. Clumsy, and he went to his better old suitcase. Goodbye, called Mr. Clumsy, really meaning good riddance. Then, Mr. Persnickety fussed around his house as he never fussed before. Persnickety, old persnick pot, polishing and mending, and repairing and straightening, and sorting out and cleaning and putting everything he had exactly. He had them before Mr. Clumsy had come to say. He even dusted the flowers in the garden. That evening, Mr. Persnickety was in his kitchen polishing an egg when he heard a crash outside. Oh no, he groaned, not Mr. Clumsy back again. It can't be, it mustn't be, it isn't. And it wasn't. It was somebody else. Somebody who walked straight through Mr. Mr. Persnickety's garden gate. Somebody who can't help having little accidents. Somebody who've met before. Hello, smiled Mr. Bump. I've come to visit. Nope, boy, that's my remove. How come you changed Mr. Fussy into Mr. Persnickety? We can't say Mr. Fussy. It's season 1. He's called Mr. Persnickety. He's in light green. And season 2, they made him darker green. And then it's Mr. Fussy. Oh, should you change the name? Stick it some egads. I'd like a piece of it. Oh my goodness. Something funnier than you do. Move. Oh my, the craziness is going to happen on my phone, and then let me find it. Strange things could happen in 1979 and 1985. I can't sing this 1985 song. I don't remember stuff that's similar to Van Halen.
Excellent shot as well, Mr. Noisy.
Oh, sorry, the folks got me. The folks got me. This is what he looks like from season 1, and then he is a little lighter green. So, they made him a darker green. Persnickety if I'm American. Or else you can say Persnickety, and then Let's see the sing when he says again. Well, I imitate that and copy that.
Excellent shot as well, Mr. Noisy.
Excellent shot as well, Mr. Noisy. You